Jesus is brought to Annas. This is also told in Matthew 26:57-58, Mark 14:53-54, Luke 22:54. The Roman officer and his men, together with the temple police, arrested Jesus and tied him up. They took him first to Annas, who was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, the high priest that year. This was the same Caiaphas who had told the Jewish leaders, "It is better if one person dies for the people." Peter says he doesn't know Jesus. This is also told in Matthew 26:69-70, Mark 14:66-68, Luke 22:55-57. Simon Peter and another disciple followed Jesus. That disciple knew the high priest, and he followed Jesus into the courtyard of the high priest's house. Peter stayed outside near the gate, but the other disciple came back out and spoke to the girl at the gate. She let Peter go in, but asked him, "Aren't you one of that man's followers?" "No, I'm not," Peter answered. It was cold, and the servants and temple police had made a charcoal fire. They were warming themselves around it when Peter went over and stood near the fire to warm himself. Jesus is questioned by the high priest. This is also told in Matthew 26:59-66, Mark 14:55-64, Luke 22:66-71. The high priest questioned Jesus about his followers and his teaching. But Jesus told him, "I have spoken freely in front of everyone, and I have always taught in our meeting places and in the temple, where all our people come together. I have not said anything in secret. Why are you questioning me? Why don't you ask the people who heard me? They know what I have said." As soon as Jesus said this, one of the temple police hit him and said, "That's no way to talk to the high priest." Jesus answered, "If I have done something wrong, say so. But if not, why did you hit me?" Jesus was still tied up, and Annas sent him to Caiaphas, the high priest. Peter again denies that he knows Jesus. This is also told in Matthew 26:71-75, Mark 14:69-72, Luke 22:58-62. While Simon Peter was standing there warming himself, someone asked him, "Aren't you one of Jesus' followers?" Again, Peter denied it and said, "No, I am not." One of the high priest's servants was there. He was a relative of the servant whose ear Peter had cut off. And he asked, "Didn't I see you in the garden with that man?" Once more Peter denied it, and at once a cock crowed. Jesus is tried by Pilate. This is also told in Matthew 27:1-11-14, Mark 15:1-5, Luke 23:1-5. It was early in the morning when Jesus was taken from Caiaphas to the building where the Roman governor stayed. But the crowd waited outside. Any of them who had gone inside would have become unclean and would not be allowed to eat the Passover meal. Pilate came out and asked, "What charges are you bringing against this man?" They answered, "He is a criminal. That's why we brought him to you." Pilate told them, "Take him and judge him by your own laws." The crowd replied, "We are not allowed to put anyone to death." And so what Jesus said about his death would soon come true. Pilate then went back inside. He called Jesus over and asked, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered, "Are you asking this on your own, or did someone tell you about me?" "You know I'm not a Jew." Pilate said, "Your own people and the chief priests brought you to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom doesn't belong to this world. If it did, my followers would have fought to keep me from being handed over to the Jewish leaders. No, my kingdom doesn't belong to this world. So you are a king." Pilate replied, "You are saying that I am a king," Jesus told him. "I was born into this world to tell about the truth, and everyone who belongs to the truth knows my voice." Pilate asked Jesus, "What is truth?" Jesus is sentenced to death. This is also told in Matthew 27:15-31, Mark 15:6-20, Luke 23:13-25. Pilate went back out and said, I don't find this man guilty of anything. And since I usually set a prisoner free for you at Passover, would you like me to set free the king of the Jews? They shouted, No, not him. We want Barabbas. Now Barabbas was a terrorist. Chapter 19. Pilate gave orders for Jesus to be beaten with a whip. The soldiers made a crown out of thorn branches and put it on Jesus. Then they put a purple robe on him. They came up to him and said, Hey, you king of the Jews! They also hit him with their fists. Once again Pilate went out. This time he said, I will have Jesus brought out to you again. Then you can see for yourselves that I have not found him guilty. Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. Pilate said, Here is the man. When the chief priests and the temple police saw him, they yelled, Nail him to a cross! Nail him to a cross! Pilate told them, You take him and nail him to a cross. I don't find him guilty of anything. The crowd replied, He claimed to be the Son of God. Our Jewish law says that he must be put to death. When Pilate heard this, he was terrified. He went back inside and asked Jesus, Where are you from? But Jesus did not answer. Why won't you answer my question? Pilate asked. Don't you know that I have the power to let you go free or to nail you to a cross? Jesus replied, If God had not given you the power, you couldn't do anything at all to me. But the one who handed me over to you did something even worse. Then Pilate wanted to set Jesus free, but the crowd again yelled, If you set this man free, you are no friend of the emperor. Anyone who claims to be a king is an enemy of the emperor. When Pilate heard this, he brought Jesus out. Then he sat down on the judge's bench at the place known as the stone pavement. In Aramaic, this pavement is called Gabbatha. It was about midday on the day before Passover, and Pilate said to the crowd, Look at your king. Kill him, they yelled. Nail him to a cross. So you want me to nail your king to a cross? Pilate asked. The chief priest replied, The emperor is our king. Then Pilate handed Jesus over to be nailed to a cross. Jesus is nailed to a cross. This is also told in Matthew 27:32-44, Mark 15:21-32, Luke 23:26-43. Jesus was taken away, and he carried his cross to a place known as the skull. In Aramaic, this place is called Golgotha. There, Jesus was nailed to the cross, and on each side of him a man was also nailed to a cross. Pilate ordered the charge against Jesus to be written on a board and put above the cross. It read, Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. The words were written in Hebrew, Latin, and Greek. The place where Jesus was taken wasn't far from the city, and many of the Jewish people read the charge against him. So the chief priests went to Pilate and said, Why did you write that he is King of the Jews? You should have written, He claimed to be King of the Jews. But Pilate told them, What is written will not be changed. After the soldiers had nailed Jesus to the cross, they divided up his clothes into 4 parts, one for each of them, but his outer garment was made from a single piece of cloth, and it did not have any seams. The soldiers said to each other, Let's not rip it apart. We will gamble to see who gets it. This happened so that the scriptures would come true, which say, They divided up my clothes and gambled for my garments. The soldiers then did what they had decided. Jesus' mother stood beside his cross with her sister and Mary, the wife of Clopas. Mary Magdalene was standing there too. When Jesus saw his mother and his favorite disciple with her, he said to his mother, This man is now your son. Then he said to the disciple, She is now your mother." From then on, that disciple took her into his own home. The death of Jesus. This is also told in Matthew 27:45 to 56, Mark 15:33 to 41, Luke 23:44 to 49. Jesus knew that he had now finished his work, and in order to make the scriptures come true, he said, "I am thirsty." A jar of cheap wine was there. Someone then soaked a sponge with the wine and held it up to Jesus' mouth on the stem of a hyssop plant. After Jesus drank the wine, he said, "Everything is done." He bowed his head and died. A spear is stuck in Jesus' side. The next day would be both a Sabbath and the Passover. It was a special day for the Jewish people, and they did not want the bodies to stay on the crosses during that day. So they asked Pilate to break the men's legs and take their bodies down. The soldiers first broke the legs of the other two men who were nailed there. But when they came to Jesus, they saw that he was already dead, and they did not break his legs. One of the soldiers stuck his spear into Jesus' side, and blood and water came out. We know this is true because it was told by someone who saw it happen. Now you can have faith too. All this happened so that the scriptures would come true, which say, "No bone of his body will be broken." And they will see the one in whose side they stuck a spear. Jesus is buried. This is also told in Matthew 27:57 to 61, Mark 15:42 to 47, Luke 23:50 to 56. Joseph from Arimathea was one of Jesus' disciples. He had kept his secret though because he was afraid of the Jewish leaders, but now he asked Pilate to let him have Jesus' body. Pilate gave him permission, and Joseph took it down from the cross. Nicodemus also came with about 60 kilograms of spices made from myrrh and aloes. This was the same Nicodemus who had visited Jesus on one night. The two men wrapped the body in a linen cloth, together with the spices, which was how the Jewish people buried their dead. In the place where Jesus had been nailed to a cross, there was a garden with a tomb that had never been used. The tomb was nearby, and since it was the time to prepare for the Sabbath, they were in a hurry to put Jesus' body there. Jesus is alive. Chapter 20. This is also told in Matthew 28, 1 to 10, Mark 16 to 1 to 8, Luke 24, 1 to 12. On Sunday morning, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb and saw that the stone had been rolled away from the entrance. She ran to Simon Peter and to Jesus' favorite disciple and said, "They have taken the Lord from the tomb. We don't know where they have put him." Peter and the other disciple set off for the tomb. They ran side by side until the other disciple ran faster than Peter and got there first. He bent over and saw the strips of linen cloth lying inside the tomb, but he did not go in. When Simon Peter got there, he went into the tomb and saw the strips of cloth. He also saw the piece of cloth that had been used to cover Jesus' face. It was rolled up and in a place by itself. The disciple who got there first then went into the tomb, and when he saw it, he believed. At that time, Peter and the other disciple did not know that the scriptures said Jesus would rise to life. So the two of them went back to the other disciples. Jesus appears to his disciples. Jesus appears to Mary Magdalene. This is also told in Mark 16:9 to 11. Mary Magdalene stood crying outside the tomb. She was still weeping. When she stooped down and saw two angels inside, they were dressed in white and were sitting where Jesus' body had been. One was at the head and the other was at the foot. The angels asked Mary, "Why are you crying?" She answered, "They have taken away my Lord's body. I don't know where they have put him." As soon as Mary said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not know who he was. Jesus asked her, "Why are you crying? Who are you looking for?" She thought he was the gardener and said, "Sir, if you have taken his body away, please tell me so I can go and get him." Then Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned and said to him, Rabboni. The Aramaic word Rabboni means teacher. Jesus told her, Don't hold on to me. I have not yet gone to the Father, but tell my disciples that I am going to the one who is my Father and my God, as well as your Father and your God. Mary Magdalene then went and told the disciples that she had seen the Lord. She also told them what he had said to her. Jesus appears to his disciples. This is also told in Matthew 28:16-20, Mark 16:14-18, Luke 24:36-49. The disciples were afraid of the Jewish leaders, and on the evening of that same Sunday, they locked themselves in a room. Suddenly, Jesus appeared in the middle of the group. He greeted them and showed them his hands and his side. When the disciples saw the Lord, they became very happy. After Jesus had greeted them again, he said, I am sending you just as the Father has sent me. Then he breathed on them and said, Receive the Holy Spirit. If you forgive anyone's sins, they will be forgiven. But if you don't forgive their sins, they will not be forgiven. Jesus and Thomas. Although Thomas the twin was one of the 12 disciples, he wasn't with the others when Jesus appeared to them. So they told him, We have seen the Lord. But Thomas said, First I must see the nail scars in his hands and touch them with my finger. I must put my hand where the spear went into his side. I won't believe unless I do this. A week later, the disciples were together again. This time, Thomas was with them. Jesus came in while the doors were still locked and stood in the middle of the group. He greeted his disciples and said to Thomas, Put your finger here and look at my hands. Put your hand into my side. Stop doubting and have faith. Thomas replied, You are my Lord and my God. Jesus said, Thomas, do you have faith because you have seen me? The people who have faith in me without seeing me are the ones who are really blessed. Why John wrote his book. Jesus performed many other miracles for his disciples, and not all of them are written in this book. But these are written so that you will put your faith in Jesus as the Messiah and the Son of God. If you have faith in him, you will have true life. Chapter 21. Jesus appears to 7 disciples. Jesus later appeared to his disciples along the shore of Lake Tiberias. Simon Peter, Thomas the twin, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, and the brothers James and John were there. Together with 2 other disciples, Simon Peter said, I'm going fishing. The others said, We will go with you. They went out in their boat, but they didn't catch a thing that night. Early the next morning, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples did not realize who he was. Jesus shouted, Friends, have you caught anything? No, they answered. So he told them, Let your net down on the right side of your boat, and you will catch some fish. They did, and the net was so full of fish that they could not drag it up into the boat. Jesus' favorite disciple told Peter, It's the Lord. When Simon heard that it was the Lord, he put on the clothes that he had taken off while he was working. Then he jumped into the water. The boat was only about 100 meters from shore. So the other disciples stayed in the boat and dragged in the net full of fish. When the disciples got out of the boat, they saw some bread and a charcoal fire with fish on it. Jesus told his disciples, Bring some of the fish you have just caught. Simon Peter got back into the boat and dragged the net to shore. In it were 153 large fish, but still the net did not rip. Jesus said, Come and eat. But none of the disciples dared ask who he was. They knew he was the Lord. Jesus took the bread in his hands and gave some of it to his disciples. He did the same with the fish. This was the 3rd time that Jesus appeared to his disciples after he was raised from death. Jesus and Peter. When Jesus and his disciples had finished eating, he asked, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than the others do? Simon Peter answered, Yes, Lord, you know I do. Then feed my lambs, Jesus said. Jesus asked the 2nd time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter answered, Yes, Lord, you know I love you. Then take care of my sheep. Jesus told him. Jesus asked a third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was hurt because Jesus had asked him 3 times if he loved him. So he told Jesus, Lord, you know everything. You know I love you. Jesus replied, Feed my sheep. I tell you for certain that when you were a young man, you dressed yourself and went wherever you wanted to go. But when you are old, you will hold out your hands, then others will tie your belt around you and lead you where you don't want to go. Jesus said this to tell how Peter would die and bring honor to God. Then he said to Peter, Follow me, Jesus and his favorite disciple. Peter turned and saw Jesus' favorite disciple following them. He was the same one who had sat next to Jesus at the meal and had asked, Lord, who is going to betray you? When Peter saw that disciple, he asked Jesus, Lord, what about him? Jesus answered, What is it to you if I want him to live until I return? You must follow me. So the rumor spread among the other disciples that this disciple would not die. But Jesus did not say he would not die. He simply said, What is it to you if I want him to live until I return? This disciple is the one who told all this. He wrote it, and we know he is telling the truth. Jesus did many other things if they were all written in books. I don't suppose there would be room enough in the whole world for all the books.